Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Hey, thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show. We've been doing it for over a year, and we designed this podcast to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM, the Digital Enterprise Society. It is the forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor every week to co-host this show with Craig Brown. Now, Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Tom. I dug into the archives and I found a gentleman that I worked with when I first got my PLM assignments at General Motors, and I thought it would be interesting for people to hear how we both, how our ideas have developed. So this will be an interesting guest today.
Nice, and it's always fun when the guest is an old friend of Craig's, because it's like I get to sit in a bar and have a beer and listen to two old friends talk PLM. So every single week, Craig and I try to bring to this show interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today, well, it's going to be just that. Today we have Bill Bone, and Bill is the CTO for Automotive at Aras. And what he does is he reviews industry strategies and requirements and then provides that information back to the company so that they can work on the tools that are going to be awesome. Hey, Bill, welcome.
Hey,
welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Tom.
So, Bill, give us a little bit of your background. How did you get started in this area, and where did you go?
Oh, well, been primarily automotive my entire life. After graduate school here in Michigan, hired into GM, did the EDS transition back in the day. Then left EDS for a while, but I came back in 2000 and was a contractor to GM through Hewlett-Packard and EDS at the time. Then I rehired into GM again as a retread, and that's where I met Craig as we did that. And now, after retiring, I've ended up at a little company, a small company, but a highly innovative company called Aras, and we work in product management capabilities.
So, Bill, it's good to hear your voice. I want to take you and I back to that first time we co-presented at one of these PLM conferences. It was the guy that used to do product innovation, so the British company. And Linda Channel connected us because I was coming from the ALM space and talking about the need for PLM to embrace it or adapt. And as I presented those kind of business requirements, you were pointing out the need for flexibility in PLM solutions. So it was interesting. In the years since then, this notion of a PLM platform has been talked about more and more, and it's something the SimData team expresses quite well. And I'd like your perspective on the journey. Have these two worlds come closer together, this application lifecycle management and the product lifecycle management, or do they still have some challenges they need to address?
They've come a lot closer. In working with some of my ALM friends and watching their presentations, they actually have a lot of replacement capability for PLM. One of the drawings that I've seen has ALM putting at the very bottom, on the lowest part of the V, the engineering V, which is not where PLM typically sits, right? I mean, you start the entire requirements process with a software management system, an application management system, and then you would come down and you'd bring in the electrical and mechanical data as related data into all of these requirements. For example, I've seen that now in two different presentations, and I think that what we're seeing is, when do you lead with software, when do you lead with hardware, and especially in automotive. In the past, we typically led with hardware, electrical, mechanical kinds of systems, and tied in software as a usage or an instance of software to these particular areas. But I think that's the journey is, I think right now that's reversing itself. And I don't know exactly where the end state's going to end up.
So bravo. The reason I think that it was all mechanical driven has a lot to do with the capital investment, right? Where companies spend all this money getting a plant ready to go, and not so much about services that you might want to provide your customer. Well, with all the computers being everywhere, whether it's in your phone or in your car, now it's all about services, or at least it was until the pandemic hit. Maybe it still is. We're just still reacting. So which one leads? You made that comment, which one leads, hardware or software? And I'm more and more convinced as a company, you need to be flexible, right? That it depends. It depends on what's driving the revenue, which isn't capital. Capital's a cost, right? And so depending on what service you can sell, that may or may not drive software to lead or ALM to lead PLM. And a lot of the vendors don't get it. They even the governance practices inside a company, they come up and they say, oh, well, if you just embrace my approach, then you can use PLM. And I still remember that debate. It was about a year or two before I met you about, everybody was coming in saying, we just figured this out in the last 10 years, how to do configuration management for PDM. And I had the luxury of educating them that we'd been doing embedded software 20 years longer and had been doing configuration management of software a lot longer. So it's just interesting. And configuration management is one of my pet topics because it seems to me people just gloss over it all the time. So for a moment, take me to a PLM platform. You guys at Aras talk about it as well as anybody. What's the definition and why is it so important?
Well, we probably have different definitions inside the company, but the one that I work with has probably more broader and a longer range view than some of my colleagues. I think it's any content, whether it's directly or indirectly related to assets that are tied into the product management, product development process, and then obviously all the processes. Those are actually then allocated to a very flexible product structure and with all the management and stuff.
And by structure, if you're mechanical engineering, it's very clear that's kind of a spatial thing. What I find people struggle with is, well, what do we mean by a structure of functions? Or I've even had some of my colleagues call it a bill of features, right? In a sense, you want to manage it the same way, a compatible set of stuff that will go together and that you can build reliably and sell as a service, right? So platforms or services, they provide services as opposed to a monolithic, maybe even stoic, view of how you manage things. And I still find platforms like Aras more flexible to meld into an existing company like where you and I came from than some other platforms that kind of come with a preconceived notion of the data model and a preconceived notion of BOM management. What do you? Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
I was going to respond to what you talked about there. I think what you said is very important, Craig. Getting back to your original question of what you lead with in PLM or ALM, I would say it is the system that has the most configurability and adaptability, flexibility around the product structure itself. These are not hierarchical anymore. As you know, a lot of data is not used as a mechanical element, for example, or an electrical element and getting those in the right hierarchies. But it really is taking those areas, allocating those to everything from compliance documents to websites, how you describe a vehicle. And I really want to key in on what you talked about features. We need to move from requirements, which is a parent of to features. And as you know, requirements then is a subset of those particular features. The features have long-term capability and they have long-term reliability in terms of where they're at. So you and I, from being from GM, we know that if we say we're going to get a Z51 package, we know, for example, exactly what that means year after year, even though the content, the requirements, it modifies drastically even within the year or perhaps, over years. I just wanted to bring that back to what you were talking there. So.
Yeah, and so if you're a mechanical engineer listening to this and the word feature is confusing to you, we're not talking about the geometry of a fillet. Rather, we're talking about from the customer's point of view, what are they willing to pay for? Are they willing to pay for, in a car, it's about acceleration or about crash worthiness. But there's other features like collision avoidance. And, it's interesting to think about, but it's here where if you get automation in driving done well, which I think is coming in a few years, then all of a sudden crash worthiness is less important. I mean, you probably still have it for a few more years because it takes a while to evolve. But it's just interesting that we could move from here's something that looks like a Camaro to here's something that gets me from point A to point B reliably, and I still enjoy the experience. Right? It's about the feature. It's not about the mechanical content. So interesting. Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It keeps surprising all of us. You and I have had a couple other discussions about that and whether we get together ever again at a conference. I'm sure we will. From your vantage point, how's COVID been affecting you and your company?
It has had an impact. Our CEO, I give him a lot of credit. We actually canceled our annual conference 4 weeks out. And this had to do with, we thought one case was running around in the Boston area, and he had the insight to see what was going on. And so he canceled, and we moved into a different set of company priorities that was focused on customers and people in our particular company. But he also adjusted the priorities such that the real end game was to be able to come out of this stronger than what we went in. So those were the high level directives from our CEO. And I would say all in all, I think we've achieved that. We've buckled down very, very strongly in terms of improving some of our internal processes. Our product development sequences, we're coming out with new releases approximately every 6 weeks. So, that part of it hasn't impacted it. That part of COVID has impacted our company. But however, the whole customer interaction's entirely upside down. And, it's all the kind of meetings that we're having right now, for example.
And you're working from home like I am, I assume?
I work at a combination of our home and our office.
Oh, good. So you're back in the office.
Yeah.
Things here in Michigan have stabilized if you're listening from other parts of the country. How often? What's your percentage of time in the office?
It's probably 2/3 here and 1/3 at home, and a lot of it has to do with and we have to answer questions every single day before we come in. For example, if you're feeling bad, if they don't want you to come in on those particular days, and you're feeling tired. However, I still miss, and I think a couple others of us still miss the camaraderie around. But when we're in here, this is a very safe place. You're constantly cleansing and washing your hands and that sort of thing, especially if you go in a conference room together where we're spacing and with our mask and that sort of thing. But, the whole conference table and chairs and everything are wiped down when we leave.
Do you guys limit the size? You must. There's some guidelines here in Michigan, right, that come out of the government that says don't have more than whatever it is, 10 or 20 or 5. I don't remember anymore.
Our main conference room, which would typically hold 10 to 12 people, was down to 3 to 4.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so there is a life after COVID in the office. Just remember that, everybody. So Bill, you and I, since your retirement, and then I retired not too long ago, you made some comments to me, which I'll let you decide how much of that you want to share. But I found it interesting. You went to Aras, right? We ended up going to Aras at GM for lots of reasons, but part of it was this platform and the flexibility to plug into legacy systems, which has been pretty successful. What led you back to Aras and why? Well, I thought you were retired. That's what I get told.
I tried, but
yeah, and failed. Okay,
I failed at retirement basically. I retired right after in that Thanksgiving Christmas time period in 2013, and I knew within a week that I needed to do something else, and so there's this thing about listening to the same thing on TV in the morning at 9 o'clock. It drives me insane, just to be quite honest.
There's no good content, right? Just repeat.
You just need to be doing something with a sense of purpose and involvement and passion about what you're doing. So I knew the CEO of Aras quite well, and he and I had worked together the past several years. And I just simply called him up. And that's the kind of company I like to work for. Probably the best decision I've ever made is making that phone call when we met. And he said, we'd like to start an office, a remote office in Detroit for the automotive team. Would you be like to be a part of that? I said, yes. And that's what started it all.
Interesting. So my journey is similar in that I called the people I admired and said, hey, I don't want full-time work. I just want to do something interesting, like a podcast with Thom, or like talking with Bill at we both go to a company called Method Park, which I work a little bit with, and it's a niche in the sense that it's a keystone from my point of view because it's process management, but it's also integrates into PLM. It's not the PLM solution or ALM solution, and it's interesting. They're a bridge. They're a bridge between these two worlds of ALM and PLM. And I don't know that the worlds need to be identical. I actually am more and more convinced a heterogeneous environment's what's needed. But that still leads to challenges like is the structure of the product a shared definition, maybe a better way to say it is an understood definition in both worlds. It needs to be, right? And so anyways, so congratulations with your challenge there at Aras, and predicting the automobile business. I'm just a joke for everybody. It's all about oil prices, and when they went down, the truck sales went up, despite the pandemic. So just keep watching. I do think the autonomous thing. One of the cool results of the pandemic is there's less traffic on the roads. That actually makes it easier to introduce automated vehicles. So I know, Bill, does that change your strategy at Aras, or does it just amplify that which you lead with, whether you lead with software or whether you lead with hardware, keeps being flexible?
I think it amplifies it. I want to bring in a statement of a friend that you and I both know, and perhaps I believe has been on this show before. Just circle back with this ALM PLM approach again. Kurt Gutman, who's a friend of yours, mine.
Kurt's a GM guy who's at Siemens these days. So for everybody that wants to follow.
Kirk is basically the face of competition to our company from Siemens in that particular vendor because of his role and what he does and his enablement that he's doing over there. And he's an incredible man, and I have the greatest respect for him. But he has a saying, a PLM strategy without an ALM strategy is a losing strategy. I can't agree more with that. And I think that is the one thing that a lot of the PLM vendors, if they haven't woken up to that, they need to be up to that because these new software-defined vehicles are technology-based. They're not automotive industry-based. That's where all the value in the stock price is coming from, is that they're betting on the tech, not on the wheels, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you really, really have to excel at software development and tie in this data together very quickly, very agilely, and have it come back to feature-based or customer-based kind of definitions that they understand.
Yeah, and I think everybody, don't ever forget who your customers are, the people willing to pay for the product or the service, right? The people at GM, we've been doing OnStar for many, many years. And after it was just a phone system, it became a diagnostic sport, right? That we were able to monitor the vehicle because of diagnostic messages inside the vehicle. And then bringing that back into a central database and being able to analyze it was the beginning of, field data feedback. And my goodness, that was almost 20 years ago now that we first did that. So that's the beginning of this connection between ALM and PLM in a very physical way. And now people rely on it. They rely on, the oil changes due now based on usage of the vehicle, not based on I've gone 3,000 miles, right? and there's a bunch more coming. Electrification has benefited greatly by the connection to the back office because there's new technology, especially the batteries. And so how robust they are and how they perform, you really got to link in this service data. And that's the point I wanted to make. We talk about life cycles, and A is for application and P is for product or parts. But in reality, the life cycle, the majority of it is after you manufacture it, after you release it. And I think connecting those back offices, those experiences from a customer like Thom back into the enterprise and making improvements in real time is where the future is. I mean, our Tesla does it well. The truth is, all car companies do it to some degree. And I think you'll see more and more of that now that 5G networks are coming, and connecting will get easy because the pipeline will be so big you can send all kinds of data back and forth. So, Bill, how does that affect Aras? Are you ready to farm data from service data piles? I don't know what else to call them. They typically aren't organized, right?
No, absolutely. We just recently saw an announcement, for example, I'm sure you've seen it too, with Siemens and SAP. That's all about data.
Oh, that's a buzz. Yeah. What does it really mean?
It's a direct statement and a direct compliment to what you're saying. It is access to all this data to be able to put it into both enterprise and operational data stores. Operational data stores, as you know, can answer specific questions better than anything on a particular area that app is managing. But you also need all of this contemporary data that goes with it, that's what that's all about. So, anyways,
so that's an interesting. That we should start a new discussion here about service lifecycle management. So who does it best? Well, SAP, what they're known for is the logistics side, right, as well as monitoring factories, and that's what they do really well, right? And then bring it into a database so they can manage a ERP systems, right? Who out there in the world, just everybody listening, really does the back end office and monitoring of usage really well? Well, the Apple guys do it really well. The people at Amazon do it really well. So car companies, are we going to end up leading those guys, or are we going to end up just being a component in their bigger systems? It'll be interesting to watch. Bill, does Aras, well, maybe you don't want to talk about it. Aras is noticing this partnership of SAP and Siemens, as we all are. Are you thinking of other kinds of partnerships that might be pulling this service lifecycle management?
I think our CEO is always dabbling in that area.
Yeah, Peter's like that. So it'll be interesting. We'll keep watching. Bill, it's great to catch up with you. I appreciate you making the time for us. And I do look forward to the next time we're face to face, even if we have masks on. And hopefully that's not too many more months. So, Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
So, Bill, thank you so much for joining us. And before I let guests go, I often like to circle this back because a lot of our listeners are trying to grow their careers. And you've had a long and successful, business life. What advice, if you were the sage sitting on the mountain and somebody came to you and said, hey, Bill, mentor me. I want to have a long, sustainable career in this, slice of the world we call PLM. What would you tell them?
I think get involved with what you're most passionate about is the most important thing. I remember being in high school, I was mesmerized with cars. And even though I ventured into financial services for a few years, I came back to cars and vehicles. I think that what you really, really are energized about, what you naturally want to learn about, when you watch those YouTube videos at night, for example, I still watch the C8, almost every one of the new ones that come out on that. The things that really energize you, that's where you need to be.
So the other question that sort of comes to mind along this whole thing of, hey, you've had this long career. What do you tell someone who's younger is you've seen a lot of changes in the way work life is, right? And we've been fast forwarded because of the pandemic with people moving and working from home. So what are the biggest changes that you've seen in the way people work and the way careers are developed? And then the flip side is what isn't going to change?
I think the one big thing I've seen over my career, especially in the IT side, I've worked in engineering as well as in the IT side, and it happens in both disciplines, is the amount of process that's necessary to grow and successfully run a big company around products that have very limited defects. That's probably the biggest change that I've actually seen. In terms of being able to adapt to that change as a person, you have a very strong role that you must be able to take in that. And you have to be enthusiastic. You have to be a self-learner. You have to not wait on somebody else to tell you what to get involved in. You have to pick this stuff up and you got to run with it and learn it yourself. That's my biggest statement I would make on that. So,
any other piece of advice for someone growing a career?
If you're getting into automotive, it's a great place to be. There's a long runway of good things to be able to do and where you can make contributions.
And I bet there's going to be a lot of interesting changes in the world of automotive over the next decade.
Oh yeah. They already started, right? I mean, it's just a lot of people don't realize it if you're not at the front lines. It is fascinating. I kind of miss it actually, but I don't miss the full-time work. and I do like visiting with a little less stressful visiting with Bill and others around the industry and just say, well, here's the next thing we should work on strategically, right? And I do think these universes are meld. Eventually, we'll talk about services lifecycle management, I think. And I didn't coin that. That came from somebody that Bill and I and others at Aras know, Professor Egner in Europe. And I think it's coming. And I think that'll be it. Right? It's already in certain products, right? Anything that's in your handheld products, they're already doing this quite well. Maybe annoyingly, right? You get advertisements that you don't want, but that's a different problem. Anyways, thanks again, Bill. It's great hearing your voice.
I greatly appreciate it, guys. Thanks a whole lot both to you and Tom.
Yep. Thanks again, Bill. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. We're going to be back every single week with fresh thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.